Alright, well, in part 4 of our series on Ultimate Alliance, we finally shuffled through the BS and got to the meat of the series, the actual Ultimate Alliance game, which dropped on Xbox, PC, PS2, Xbox 360, Wii, and PS3, with PS4 and Xbox One remasters coming later on, which didn't last all that long, before Weird Rights had it removed from the game stores in question. A GBA and PSP port of the game were also squished down to handhelds. For the purpose of this video, we played the Xbox 360 port, though sadly we were not able to play the upgrade port on the Xbox One or PS4, because they were removed from digital storefronts before Aiden or I got the chance to purchase the games. Marvel Ultimate Alliance dropped 1 week after the competing game Justice League Heroes, and Aiden and I loved this game as kids. We never actually had the Xbox 360 version of this game till we bought it for this video, but I must admit, as a kid who was a superhero fan, it was cool being able to play as heroes like Iron Man, Spider-Man, and the Fantastic Four, all in one game, with the developer Ravensoft working with Marvel to see the whole of the Marvel Universe available to them rather than just the X-Men of the original game series. But I'll admit, on the graphically updated, and at the time new consoles, the game sadly didn't age quite as well as we hoped. Like the old X-Men Legends games, this game is a collaboration between Ravensoft, their parent company Activision, and Marvel, with help from Vicarious Visions for the PSP and Wii ports, and Beatnox for the PC port, with Barking Lizard's technology doing the separate Game Boy Advance port. The game was made in the same style as X-Men Legends, but took more of a linear approach than the second game in that series, which made it a bit easier to tackle levels end to end without any confusion. For the Wii versions, Vicarious Visions added Link and Samus from The Legend of Zelda and Metroid respectively, with both being prototypes before Nintendo said hell no and they were cut from the game. This wouldn't actually be too outlandish during this era though, since Link was famously featured in Soul Calibur 2. But perhaps, alongside non-video game characters, Nintendo had to pass, plus Soul Calibur 2 was created by Namco, which Nintendo has a long-standing relationship, something which Activision and Ravensoft don't really have. On top of that, when demoed in front of Nintendo, it was on a PS2 build of the game, which scared Nintendo away. The game for Xbox 360 was released side by side in the same box as Forza Motorsports 2. But these days, if you want the DLC, you'll need the Ultimate Alliance Gold Edition, a port of the game that runs for quite a bit of money, running around $200 or so. We opted not to do that, and with the weird rights issues, we were sadly locked out of the DLC packs, so we can only imagine what those are like. The story of Ultimate Alliance follows the heroes of the Marvel Universe being put through the ringer by a powerful iteration of Doctor Doom, hell-bent on ruling the Marvel Universe. Along the way, they also come to blows with other villains such as Galactus, Fin Fang Foom, the Winter Soldier, MODOK, Krang, the Mandarin, Arcade, Mephisto, the Wrecking Crew, Super Skrull, and a series of evil clones created by Doctor Doom, with the game climaxing in a fight with, well, Doctor Doom. As always, the game has loads of playable characters. Much of the X-Men play the same, but a lot of the roster of those games were omitted in favor of characters from the wider Marvel Universe, rather than just porting over a bunch of characters from X-Men Legends. In the spirit of brevity, I'll be skipping these characters that we talked about in the X-Men Legends duology, and we'll talk about everyone new. Besides the RPG elements that have changed a bit, most of the characters from X-Men Legends that were ported over are effectively the same as their X-Men Legends counterparts. We'll talk more about the RPG elements later though. We'll start with Black Panther. He originated in the comics for the issue Fantastic Four number 52 from 1966. He's the king of Wakanda, who doubles as its defender, the Black Panther. And while comic fans knew him, with him being a staple of the Marvel Universe, this is a bit before he was a famous movie character that he is today. Black Panther is mostly physically, but is pretty bouncy, which can lead to some issues by ledges and stuff, given the fact that this game can be occasionally wonky. He's pretty good, you just need to make sure you watch his placement, or it can lead to an insta-death situation, which is always frustrating. Blade is a character from the darker end of the Marvel Universe, being half human, half vampire, and is a vampire hunter who originated in Tomb of Dracula number 10 from 1973. He was already a pop culture figure when this game was made, with a pretty famous set of films starring Wesley Snipes, a series of films which would be the first step in saving Marvel from bankruptcy, After the comics crash following the 90s gimmick era, which is again probably a story for another time, Blade is a solid character that is kind of a mix of ranged and sword-based attacks. He was fun, but meh. Captain America, the Steve Rogers version I should add, first appeared in Captain America Comics #1 from 1940, and is Marvel's token propaganda character turned Avenger following his resurgence in Avengers #4. He was pretty well known at the time, but since exploded in popularity when he was portrayed by Chris Evans in the MCU, after 4 other live-action attempts tried and failed to gain any sort of popularity. He's a pretty powerful S.H.I.E.L.D. character that we made one of our mains in the form of U.S. Agent, who's one of the handful of characters as costumes which are playable in this game. U.S. Agent, as I said, is playable as an alt costume of Captain America. Part of the new RPG mechanics was being able to improve each suit individually, with each having their own power sets and gimmicks when compared to the other suits. U.S. Agent for his part seemed to be the best, so that's the one we upgraded. U.S. Agent, or John Walker, first appeared in Captain America #323 from 1986, who after a stint as Captain America became the U.S. Agent, the great value Captain America more or less. He was kind of obscure at the time of the game, but would grow in popularity being added to the MCU. The U.S. Agent plays the same as Captain America with different perks, improving his physical attacking and such. Daredevil first appeared in 1964's Daredevil #1, and like Black Panther is slightly jumpy. We only played Daredevil in the simulator mode, which allows players to do mini challenges based on the characters and selects level segments for reasons we'll come back to. But he was actually really good. This game came out a couple years after Ben Affleck played him in the Daredevil film, so he was still somewhere in the cultural consciousness, despite that movie not doing super well. I liked Daredevil and played him quite a bit as a kid, I remember, so he's solid. Deadpool is here, but we talked about him in our video on X-Men Legends 2, so we won't go into him too much. He plays pretty similar to those games though, with teleportation and physical heavy attacks. Doctor Strange first appeared in Strange Tales 110 and is one of the few characters Steve Ditko helped create for Marvel before leaving the company. As you probably know, he is Marvel's resident magician character and became popularized after becoming a major player in the MCU and a fan favorite. Doctor Strange isn't bad since he has really good boost mechanics, but is a bit weak when it comes to projection powers, so we didn't really use him beyond the simulator missions. Elektra first appeared in Daredevil #168 from 1980 and is an assassin that works closely with Daredevil, being his on and off girlfriend. She had a movie around this time starring Jennifer Garner, Ben Affleck's ex-wife. She's actually pretty strong as a physical attacker, and she's quick. Not bad with crowd control, especially when you keep using her pretty strong boost move. Ghost Rider, or Johnny Blaze, first appeared in Marvel Spotlight #5 from 1972 and is a character that has been pretty popular on the dark side of the Marvel Universe for decades, and was portrayed in his film by famous actor Nicolas Cage. His boost is strong, with his pull attack, which will stun enemies and allow you to beat them down. He also has 2 characters as costumes. Vengeance, who first appeared in Ghost Rider #21 from 1991, and is a Ghost Rider-like character. We never tried this costume because his perks didn't seem that good. And there's also Phantom Rider, who's basically Ghost Rider, but in the Wild West, first appearing in Ghost Rider #1 from 1966, and is basically a ghost cowboy. Human Torch first appeared in Fantastic Four #1 in 1961, and up until Marvel and Disney started trying to basically get rid of the characters of the Fantastic Four, hurting the brand's image, was part of the premier Marvel super team, the Fantastic Four. Regardless, the Human Torch is a projection character who had a solid boost, so he wasn't bad. If you run him on a team with the rest of the Fantastic Four, you'll also receive an additional boost, which will help the whole party. Iceman returns in this game from X-Men Legends, and on his base is mostly unchanged from his original incarnation. The Invisible Woman is the next character, and like her brother, the Human Torch, also originated in Fantastic Four #1 from 1961. She's absolute dog shit if you don't use her boost, but if you use her boost, she's pretty much invincible, making her actually fairly busted. Despite her energy projection being so weak, you're better off just beating people up with standard attacks, which is pretty tedious. Iron Man is playable here after being a secret character in X-Men Legends 2. Again, he's an energy projection character. We had him on our roster, but didn't play as him super often and usually had him on a support role. War Machine is a character as a costume in Iron Man. James Rhodes was a longtime ally of Iron Man, originating in Iron Man number 118 in 1978, and filling in the Iron Man role for a while before Tony would return to the Iron Man role, and he would take up the War Machine mantle around this time, as the Iron Man stand-in for the West Coast Avengers, starting in West Coast Avengers number 94 from 1993. He has since become pretty famous as the character, being featured in the Iron Man and Avengers films, with him supposedly supposed to get his own film in the next few years potentially, though the MCU's weird right now. We used the Ultimate Iron Man costume. It was the ugliest costume but had the best powers. I absolutely despise the Ultimate Iron Man suit, but regardless, I digress. Luke Cage was another one of our mains, being super powerful and working pretty well as our beater character with a really strong regen. First appearing in Hero for Hire number 1 from 1972, Luke Cage was kind of the comics version of Dolomite or Shaft, since Marvel adopted the blaxploitation and Marvel Arts movements of film in the 1970s and adapted them to their comics around that time. This, however, had eventually led to him becoming an Avenger, and he is now one of Marvel's major black characters these days, standing up there with Blade and Black Panther. Mr. Fantastic is the next member of the Fantastic Four, who premiered in Fantastic Four 1, believe it or not, and on his own may be the most assly character in the whole game. He doesn't hit very hard, he has really bad offense and defense. He's a physical attacker, but at least he has some range with his arms since his elastic powers, but he burns through energy super fast at his base form, and we didn't really feel the need to want to level him up. I wouldn't really use him unless you're running a Fantastic Four team and have a lot of coins to spend and time to grind. Miss Marvel, or Carol Danvers, who these days is Captain Marvel, first appeared in Marvel Superheroes number 13 and was a character that had kind of a long-term identity crisis, starting as Captain Marvel's love interest, then pseudo sidekick up to 2012, when she finally became Captain Marvel and has since kind of become a main entity in the comics, with Marvel trying to push the character ever since to mixed success, as we could see with her first film being incredibly popular, and her second film being one of the biggest box office flops of all time. She was pretty solid in this game, with pretty solid energy projection powers and being very fast. I could have subbed her in for Iron Man as our resident flying energy projector person, but we didn't really know how powerful she was at the time, so we didn't, but if I was to do it over, I'd probably have put her in Iron Man's place, honestly. Miss Marvel has a Shannon Ventura ult, which is kind of a deep cut, Shannon being another woman to take on the Miss Marvel identity way back in The Thing 35 from 1986, after being introduced in The Thing 27 from 1985 as just Shannon. For a while, The Thing was actually a pretty popular solo character beyond just being a member of the Fantastic Four. Regardless, though, we never tried this ult. Spider-Man, or Peter Parker, kind of needs no introduction, but this is the life I chose. First appearing in 1962's Amazing Fantasy 15, Spider-Man kinda sucks in this game. Granted, we never mained him, and he was one of the hardest simulator challenges, which may have played a factor in it, and he might have been decent, I don't know. Scarlet Spider is playable as a costume and is basically a clone of Peter Parker that originated in Amazing Spider-Man 149 from 1975 before becoming Scarlet Spider in Spider-Man 52 from 1994. Ben Reilly as a clone has always kind of been the one fan favorite clone of Peter, who has 7 other clones, because that's how comics works. Never played this alt costume though, but it's cool seeing some Scarlet Spider recognition. Nick Fury is Marvel's resident spy and first appeared in Sergeant Fury number 1 back when he was a military character. This is technically Nick Fury Sr., because to have synergy with Sam Jackson's take on the MCU, a second Nick Fury Jr., was created. Though Sam Jackson's take is confusingly based on the Ultimate Universe interpretation, which is an odd case of comics inspiring film, which would in turn inspire comics. This was the only way they figured they could make him work, though. You unlock Fury at the end of the game for beating story mode, and if you want, he has a Ultimate Nick Fury ult costume, so I guess you can kind of play one that looks more similar to the MCU version if you so desire. Silver Surfer is unlocked after defeating all training missions and is an energy projector. He first appeared in Fantastic Four number 48 from 1965 and is pretty well known as being a Fantastic Four supporting character and a Herald of Galactus. He was in Fantastic Four Rise of the Silver Surfer pretty soon after this game came out. Spider-Woman is a character created for Marvel to maintain the rights to the name Spider-Woman and isn't particularly important as an aspect of Spider-Man's lore. Created in Marvel Spotlight number 32 as Arachne, before being turned into Spider-Woman, she has energy projection powers and is fine. Arachne is also playable as a costume, though this appears to be the Julia Carpenter version, not the original Jessica Drew Arachne. Julia Carpenter first appeared in Secret Wars number 6 and is currently the newest Madam Web, who we all know from the now infamous film adaptation by Sony.
Whatever the future holds. We'll be ready.
Spider-Girl is the final playable variant of Spider-Woman, who first appeared in What If number 105 from 1997. She would eventually get a pretty long-running comic series, which is abnormal for an out-of-main continuity series, especially at the time. She is the daughter of Peter Parker and inherited her powers, though it is worth noting that unlike most characters from this game, she's not actually canon to the main Marvel universe, originating in Earth 982. Regardless, she's an alt suit for Spider-Woman, which probably made sense from a model perspective, since they already kind of had a build, and you just kind of have to put her in a Spider-Man suit. But her powers are more in line with Spider-Man, so from a gameplay perspective, that might have made more sense, but they probably would have had to essentially recreate the character from the ground up, and I don't know how programming works, but it just probably was easier to do it this way. Whatever. Storm returns from X-Men Legends and plays pretty similar as a base character to her appearance in those games. She remains solid, but her boost isn't nearly as busted as the one in the second X-Men Legends game, which was giving the entire team basically invincibility along with herself for like 2 minutes and costing very little energy. So Storm isn't nearly as busted as she was in those games. A little more balance was put towards her, but yeah. The final member of the Fantastic Four, the Thing, is here, and he is the main playable tank of the game. He's pretty solid in this game, being a tank through and through, and is definitely the most playable solo member of the Fantastic Four, and the one that is most likely to end up on a team if you're not running a Fantastic Four build. Thor is playable and actually kind of sucks, surprisingly. He first appeared in Venus 11 from 1950 technically, but the version that is still relevant today is the one from Journey into Mystery 83 from 1962. The early version of Thor was a one-off Marvel Universe villain who was retconned into the more well-known interpretation of the character, not really looking or acting the same as the final version. Beta Ray Bill is an alt costume and a weird horse Thor who first appeared in Thor 337 from 1983. He wielded Stormbreaker, which gave him his similar powers to Thor. That was that one hammer Thor made in Endgame for normies watching this. Finally, Wolverine returns with a few differences from the original X-Men Legends games, besides the fact that his healing factor is now costume exclusive, so you have to unlock his brown costume. You are unable to automatically heal, which kind of makes him a bit weaker, though he still has his pretty good, strong tank beat 'em up attacks, so we still ran him, and he was a solid passive character for us, but we kept him on the roster since he was still pretty consistent. Some exclusive characters and DLC characters were in the game as well. However, due to the game's DLC not being purchasable anymore, we can only dream of what they were like, or you can probably find the gameplay pretty easily online, or pay $200 for the game, or emulate it. But whatever. The Game Boy Advance port has Namor as an exclusive, and he is one of the earliest Marvel characters, first appearing in Motion Picture Funnies Weekly number 1 from 1939. In the console ports, he appears as a side character in the Atlantis mission, but isn't playable. This is the only exclusive to the downgraded Game Boy port. The PSP has 3 further exclusives. These are Black Widow, who first appeared in Tales of Suspense 52, who herself has a costume as a character, Yelena Belova, who first appeared in Inhumans Volume 2, number 5 from 1999. It also has the original Captain Marvel from Marvel Superheroes 12 from 1967, who has the character as costume alt, Janice Val from Silver Surfer Annual number 6 from 1993, Ronan, or Maya Lopez, who first appeared in Daredevil Volume 2 number 9, who these days is most well known for being Echo on the Disney Plus show Echo. The 7th gen consoles had a few exclusives over the 6th gen ports, which included the return of Colossus from X-Men Legends, who's still a tank, but not nearly as good as the Thing notably. Moon Knight, who first appeared in Werewolf by Night number 32 from 1975, and is a mixed attack character with some projectiles. We had him on our squad for a bit, but swapped him for a US agent. He is solid, but still a bit underpowered. My first YouTube channel, Moon Knight Movies, was named in his honor, so fun fact there, I guess.
What's up? Oh right, the meteor. Okay, let's go.
This is probably what led to this OK character being added to our team when he was far weaker than the others in our lineup, so he pretty quickly got swapped with US Agent. Finally, we have the DLC characters that were available in the Gold Edition remaster, which sees the return of Cyclops. We liked him in X-Men Legends, and since most of these characters were one-for-one ported over basically from their X-Men Legends counterparts, I imagine he's still pretty good. Dr. Doom, the main villain of this game, was playable. He first appeared in Fantastic Four number 5. Christoph Bernard is an alternate skin, and he's an android replacement of Doom, who first appeared in Fantastic Four 247 from 1982. Hawkeye is playable in the DLC, or if you have the PSP version, and first appeared in 1964's Tales of Suspense 57. I'm going to take a wild guess and say he's a ranged fighter. I don't know, could be wrong about that. Hulk is a DLC fighter who I imagine plays pretty similarly to the Thing. I must say I'm kind of shocked such a famous character, especially at the time, who was one of Marvel's big 3 of that era, was relegated to not being in the base game, but whatever. The character first appeared in Incredible Hulk number 1 from 1962. Nightcrawler returns in this game as a DLC character. He was solid in X-Men Legends, but wasn't great and we never mained him. Magneto also returns from X-Men Legends 2 as DLC, and Sabretooth gets his first playable appearance on a console port of one of these games as DLC, previously only being playable in the PC port of X-Men Legends 2. Finally, we have the Spider-Man spin-off character Venom, who is Eddie Brock and originated in Web of Spider-Man 18 before becoming Venom in Amazing Spider-Man 299 and 300. He, of course, has 2 alternate costumes himself. First, Angelino Fortino Venom, who was only Venom for 1 arc before being killed off between Marvel Knights Spider-Man number 6 and 8. And Mac Gargan Venom, who started as the Scorpion in Amazing Spider-Man number 19 and 20 from 1964 before becoming Venom in Marvel Knights Spider-Man number 10 and being the main Venom for a number of years until Spider-Man's bully Flash Thompson became a weird secret agent Venom, and then Eddie Brock just took back the role. This is also the main version of Venom in Ultimate Alliance 2, which we'll come back to eventually. Well, that was a lot of characters. Anyways, the gameplay of this game follows the same format as X-Men Legends at its core, which is that you select 4 characters and attempt to go through the game's levels, fighting numerous enemies and bosses. This game trades out health and energy packs for the game to instead have those stat regenerators being made into orbs attracted to the characters that are dropped fairly generously throughout boss fights and enemy encounters. The health pack system was nice, but this is one of the many changes Ravensoft made in an attempt to streamline the game into something less confusing for casual gamers and kids, I imagine. The RPG leveling system was also streamlined, with the game setting the points you earn from leveling up to be automatically distributed throughout your powers unless you manually turn that setting off on each character. Also, you're no longer allowed to min-max base stats as much, since those are distributed by the game as you level up, giving you no control over your base stats no matter what you do. You can't turn this setting off. Though I will say the game itself gives the points out pretty generously, so while I liked tweaking those myself, you won't get totally screwed over by the game cooking this mechanic into the game's automated systems. You still get point upgrades for moves, which is nice and allows you to power up the moves you want and ignore powers less used. I would say the strategy I would recommend is power up a direct attack, one special attack, and one boost. You only get up to 4 moves at once, so this is kind of ideal. And you also have your super move mapped to the Y button as per the X-Men Legends games. Boosts in this game are very busted, lasting a long time and giving you powers that can be totally ridiculous. This includes things like burn damage for nearby opponents for Ghost Rider, who can just pull enemies in, being unaffected or nearly unaffected by ranged attacks and stuff like that. If you have all 3 of these move types boosted well, you'll be in good shape. Launch your boost, use strong attacks on close by enemies, and if you get swarmed, you can use one of the attacks that'll attack multiple enemies. When you kill enemies along the way, they not only drop health and energy orbs, but it'll also drop coins which you can spend to level up moves, though this is very pricey, as well as being able to buy upgrades for your suits, which is the primary use for this mechanic. Each suit has their own skills, so pick one to invest in and dump money into it. These are usually really busted, have health and energy regeneration, attack boosts, defense boosts, extra XP, and so on, stuff like that. These are worth the money for sure, and isn't something to be overlooked, and kind of makes each suit a different playstyle slightly. While the game's levels take a more linear approach, like the first X-Men Legends game, it's densely packed with enemies, and the levels, until you're really overpowered, will take you a while as you dispatch wave after wave of enemies. I did miss some of the exploration aspects of X-Men Legends 2 with the more maze-like levels, but it's still easy to overlook things like the Black Panther and Daredevil action figures, which are used to unlock each of those particular characters, as well as concept art and stuff like that, so the levels are still worth exploring every nook and cranny. Though I suppose, in bringing up unlockable characters, I should address the elephant in the room. If you play the Xbox 360 port, and as I understand it, the PS3 port, most of the characters come with achievements upon unlock, which will pop up when the character unlock is prompted, though by some sort of glitch, this will not actually unlock the character and will only give you the achievement. So the only way to actually unlock the characters on your first playthrough is to save when possible, unlock the achievement, then restart the game from the previous checkpoint and re-unlock the character in question. Since the achievement prompt doesn't pop up, since you already earned it, the achievement won't block the character unlock, and so you can play as the new character. I always thought achievements were kind of separate from the base gameplay, like they would just prompt to unlock at some point and that was kind of a separate thing, but apparently not. It's pretty annoying that that glitch exists, especially in a major licensed game by Activision, one of the biggest companies in gaming for like 40 years now. But it is there, and it's annoying. This doesn't happen in one occasion, mind you. It happens for each unlockable character: Nick Fury, Silver Surfer, Blade, Daredevil, and Black Panther. You may notice, if you're familiar with the game, I didn't mention Ghost Rider since he's sort of an exception to the rule. You see, when unlocking Ghost Rider, you have the option of swapping one of your characters with Ghost Rider to play him through the rest of the level, or you can unlock him at the end. In this case, we took Ghost Rider and left my main Luke Cage because I was clicking through the menu too fast. At the end of the level, you start playing as Luke again once he's saved from the demons or whatever. Issue is, an achievement pops up, so you're either soft locked out of one of your main party that you use to unlock Ghost Rider, or you're locked out of Ghost Rider. Regardless, you need to go back almost 30 minutes of gameplay to then go back through to get Ghost Rider and save the character you left behind. This is the only way to maintain both, and briefly locked us out of Luke Cage until we decided to go back for him since he was just so astronomically busted. This is such an obnoxious glitch that even with the extra 7th gen bonus characters, it's almost more worth just playing the 6th gen ports, since this glitch only happens on the 7th generation. This is something we never bumped into as kids playing the 6th gen port. Since we didn't realize this in time, we also got soft locked out of Daredevil, unless we wanted to restart the whole game, that is. It is such an annoying bug that frankly should have been noticed before launch, since it's blatant and a constant issue in the game. But it wasn't noticed and seemingly never fixed, at least not in the base port of the game. Ultimate Alliance has several levels with different locations throughout the Marvel Universe divided between 5 acts. The game sees the team go to the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier, Atlantis, Mandarin's Castle, Stark Tower, Atlantis, the Sanctum Sanctorium, Murder World, Mephisto's Realm, Valhalla, the Skrull Planet, and Doctor Doom's Castle. This veritable tour of the Marvel Universe packed into a campaign that's probably only about 10 or 11 hours if you just go front to back, not doing the simulator missions or looking for collectibles, and is a fast way to get a tour of the famous comic book universe and its locales. X-Men Legends didn't always have the benefit of hitting iconic locations, with some of its levels feeling somewhat repetitive. Go to the X-Mansion, hit the sewers, cityscape, sewers again. I think the variety of locations in this game is kind of nice and further immerses you into the world of Marvel. I think one standout level is when you're put up to blows with Arcade. This level has some trippy mechanics and plays with the fabric of Ultimate Alliance and its engine, creating a fairly unique experience. It also has some in-engine throwbacks to some Activision classics, with the cast forced to play through a level of the seminal Atari game Pitfall and later Breakout. It was a fun way for the studio to also give a nod to some old games, packing the world not only with Marvel references but also some cool game references as well, blending the mediums together further. Of course, as I said, the team hoped to go further with the Wii port and add Link and Samus, which would have been pretty cool, but Nintendo shut that down. Though it is worth noting, Nintendo would randomly publish the third game in this trilogy as a Switch exclusive, but they didn't redeem themselves and add Link or Samus to those games, sadly. The enemies of this game, at their core, are divided into 2 categories, with those being melee and ranged. But level to level, the team at Ravensoft added some variety, like flying enemies and grapplers in Mephisto's realm, or fire giants that act as mini-bosses. Some enemies have resistances like shields, which need to be removed, or they're bullet sponges, or standard resistance to physical, ranged, or energy attacks. The game does a good job of notating what is energy or physical resistant, so it's pretty easy to figure out who's who. Boss battles are a major factor in this game as well, with 60 unique bosses in the game pulling from all corners of the huge comic universe. Most are pretty easy enemies that are just a tad stronger than their lackeys, but some have gimmicks that range from pretty cool to slightly annoying. Bosses also drop a lot of resources, and boss rooms often hold lots of boxes that drop tons of coins and health. As you beat down the bosses, they'll also drop resources to keep you alive during the fight, which is kind of nice. Usually around halfway, the boss drops his first health and energy boost, and from there drops them even more frequently. This is helpful for the solo simulator missions, but makes playing in a team of 4 admittedly pretty easy. As with a lot of early 7th gen games, Ravensoft made a lot of bosses have cooked in quick time events, something that can be satisfying in a post fight for a cool finish, but can be moderately annoying if you're forced to do it throughout combat, or even worse if it's required to do damage, which sadly is often the case in Marvel Ultimate Alliance. It's extra frustrating because Ravensoft opted to occasionally make it really tight timing, which got a bit tricky, especially when recording, since even the micro delay from the capture card caused us some issues. This was especially difficult during the Captain America Simulator mission, which saw you instantly fail if you failed a super tight QuickTime event, with the simulator missions being super tedious as they were on a 20-minute timeline, which never had us run out of time, but most missions did take around 10 to 15 minutes, so losing progress to a QuickTime event was fairly infuriating. Much like X-Men Legends, multiplayer is the focus of this top-down beat-em-up with RPG mechanics, with 4 characters and up to 4 players able to play concurrently. You can also get team boosts if you make a team based around a team from the comic books, i.e. boost for playing as the New Avengers or boost for playing as the Fantastic Four. We ended up making a team of New Avengers by coincidence in our main team of Captain America, Iron Man, Luke Cage, and Wolverine, who all happened to be on the New Avengers roster. This gave us a small boost, though not enough to really make or break a level. While I think the team was solid, even if you were to make a team without those boosts, I think you would have been fine though. Much of the roster was based off the New Avengers from the time, so it's pretty easy to get boosted off that. Or you can pretty obviously pick out who was in the Fantastic Four, or if you have a base knowledge of the comics, you can put something together. Though these are all teams as of 2006, so more modern team-ups might not potentially work, depending what the standing was on those characters. I do like the amount of characters available in the game and the fact that you can beat the game in a variety of ways. If you want to do a Fantastic Four lineup and make it a Fantastic Four game, you can. If you want to go Avengers, that's easy too. It allows for a good variety, and as long as you have a mix of characters and not just brute strength or ranged characters, you won't easily be brought down when enemies have resistances and the like. Graphically, the game looks pretty impressive, and a decent upgrade from the 6th Gen X-Men Legends games, and it also opts for a more realistic style than those games slightly. Locations are less muddy and more varied, and it uses the then newly released hardware very well for being a game available across 2 console generations and being made so early on in the 7th Gen's lifespan. It looks pretty nice, and the character silhouettes stand out nicely, along with using costumes inspired primarily by the main Marvel Universe to keep them all colorful. A few exceptions to this rule exist, like Captain America, whose main costume is more reminiscent of his Ultimate gear, but everyone looks good, and I think the game has very readable graphics with nice character models, especially considering the era in which it was made. Composers on the game include Mark Greisky, Chance Thomas, and Chris Velasco, all of whom are famous for past video game scores working across series like Star Wars The Old Republic, Dota 2, or God of War, just to name a few. The music isn't super memorable, but it does a good job and is always decent. Marvel music at this time was divided between production companies. Remember, this was a couple years before the original Iron Man kicked off the MCU, so they didn't have access to the scores, since these would have to be licensed from the likes of New Line, Universal, Sony, or Fox. That doesn't really hinder the game's music much, but it does mean notable Marvel scores from the era, like Danny Elfman's Spider-Man score for example, didn't make an appearance in this game. The game has a lot of glitches and bugs, most egregiously being the broken unlock system of course, but in general little things were still busted throughout and caused minor issues for the game. For example, the engine still doesn't allow people to jump on stairs without slipping down them. How is this something they didn't fix? Some pop-up issues with bosses, like when we fought Dark Iron Man, he didn't render in, so we had to restart from the last checkpoint, and stun moves that would perma-stun you, and you'd have to load the last checkpoint since you could never break that stun. It's fair to say my reaction to this game is mixed. Ravensoft's ambitious follow-up to X-Men Legends does add a lot of new characters from around the Marvel Universe, many of whom were not mainstream characters at the time, and was virtually an encyclopedia of obscure villains in its bosses, and a world that's well fleshed out with the heroes traveling from iconic Marvel location to iconic Marvel location. However, the game, especially the arguably more important 7th Gen ports, have lots of bugs and glitches, and Vicarious Visions engine that the game was made on, and made plenty of shoddy licensed games and weak sequels, also had a lot of cracks in the foundation by this point. What good is a giant roster as well, if your unlock for said characters is broken upon first playthrough and you can't actually use them? There's a lot of extra content beyond the admittedly fun campaign though, in the simulator levels, but the levels are often long and repetitive, and if you fail you might be set back 15 minutes, which adds up pretty fast for this otherwise fairly brisk game. Also, making challenges for individual characters on levels that are made for 4 people can make it either a bit too grindy or too easy for the challenge modes that allow 4 players in the simulators. Not to mention the RPG mechanics are dumbed way down, unless you turn off all the automated spending, but even then you don't have nearly as much control as the X-Men Legends games, which at its base basically forces you to figure out the RPG mechanics as an important aspect of that game. That said, the additional importance of cosmetics and making unique builds for each costume is kind of fun and adds a bit more to the characters as costume things, since I can make a US Agent build that plays differently than an Ultimate Captain America build. It's fun, but I think the new console growing pains and huge ambition kind of caused this game and its 1-year turnaround time from its previous entry to feel a little undercooked. Marvel Ultimate Alliance would be the last game in the series to be made by Ravensoft, with its sequel not coming for another 3 years in Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2, a game developed by Vicarious Visions proper, who created the engine the first 3 games were made on rather than Ravensoft. A third game would be released a further 9 years later, developed by Team Ninja and published by Nintendo of all studios. We'll come back to those games soon though. Ultimate Alliance reviewed well at the time, with the Metacritic score hovering around the 80% range for all ports, with the Wii as an outlier at about 73%. Not bad though for a licensed game in all honesty, and a bit generous for the Xbox 360 port we played, which was riddled with bugs and glitches.